Good morning. In this brief video, I'm wanting to make another installment associated with my New Energy Declaration project, and I'm wanting to discuss this issue of climate change, global warming, greenhouse gases, this message that the public is being so inundated with in the United States and internationally. And I want to mention my reasons for concluding that this is completely a fraudulent campaign, and the science associated with the IPCC, which stands for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, is completely fraudulent. Those groups are being paid at the rate of in the neighborhood of $500 billion a year. That's $500 billion per year to concoct this sort of witch's brew, but story for the global public that carbon dioxide levels associated with burning of fossil fuels and man-made activities have caused quote-unquote global warming. And now that the public's waking up to the fact that global warming is not really occurring, and more scientists are stepping forward to say we may be entering an ice age, they've shifted to the term climate change. But the idea that carbon dioxide levels associate with this and/or are problematic is complete fraud. It is not just questionable science. It is completely fraudulent information being put forward to the public. So we have to ask, as that becomes more obvious, and that will become more obvious in the years to come, because the most reputable climate scientists and paleogeologists and so forth already know this. And the information is all over the internet. You just have to dig a little bit. You have to go a level behind the megaphones that Fox News and CNN and the mainstream publications have to go to the second and the third and the fourth page of Google returns, for example, and then you start finding these very substantive, factual academic reports that refute all of this stuff about man-made activity, carbon dioxide causing climate change and or global warming. It's not the case. So here I want to briefly mention what are the reasons for climate change and how this integrates with the New Energy Declaration campaign, and how we as a public can set our world to rights in so many ways where things have gone sideways. The core problem here is a very ancient story that has to do with human greed and deception and the desire of status quo powers in our world to maintain privilege and wealth and power. This is what's behind the bad science. This is what's behind the ongoing century-long suppression of the revolutionary free energy technologies, preventing them from entering into distribution. It has to do with coveting power, coveting wealth, not wanting to share. You know, as parents and as adults, we tell children to share. When we get out in the business world, in our corporations and high up in governments, people don't do this. These fundamentals of human behavior are what's gone wrong, and these are what need to be set back to rights. And when we formed our country, in the case of the United States, several centuries ago, this was the key concern with having a very powerful federal government, or let's just say central government, that it would become corrupt with time, and it would become an oppressive, parasitic sort of a presence relative to we the people and to the rights and to the well-being of the general public. And this is what's happened. This has happened on an international basis too. It associates with corruption of the UN system, which got off as a very good idea back in the World War II period under the leadership of Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt as an organization to, one of the drawbacks of shooting video outdoors, to increase global cooperation and to prevent major wars, as in the case of World War I and World War II. But anyway, What's going on here is that the big energy sector was started 100 years ago by J.D. Rockefeller and J.P. Morgan. J.D. Rockefeller starting Standard Oil, which despite efforts on the part of the U.S. government via the Sherman Antitrust Act to break up Standard Oil, it reformed behind the scenes and it became our world's big oil sector, which is very problematic and I would say a very parasitic negative factor in our world, because it has been involved very centrally in the suppression of the emergence of clean revolutionary energy technologies that would liberate human potential and bring about a shared abundance scenario on the planet, would eliminate the primary causes of environmental harm and so forth. And you know, that story goes all the way back to J.D. Rockefeller and J.P. Morgan versus Nikola Tesla 100 years ago, but it was repeated, has been repeated hundreds of times since then, with revolutionary energy technologies kept off the market via the private sector black shelving and/or involvement of the U.S. government, Section 181 of the 1951 Invention Secrecy Act, and so forth. But that big energy sector has gotten used to such a level of profit and power and privilege that it doesn't want to give it up. And so therefore, any energy solutions put forward must maintain this centralized structure of distribution that exists with regard to the transportation sector and grid electricity. Therefore, the only alternatives allowed out, like photovoltaics, which is the best of the renewable, sustainable genre technologies, still do not have a cost benefit and an application profile adequately, phenomenal to really threaten that centralized distribution structure for electrical power, for example, because they cost more on a per kilowatt and a per megawatt basis, and they have limitations. They can't apply to the transportation sector, etc. So the goal is to keep all of that power privilege that exists centralized, and government ties into this because it gets tax revenues from every gallon of gas sold through the electricity grid revenues and so forth. And this is the tendency on the part of any groups that develop strong status quo powers and privileges. They want to maintain them. The profits of these sectors don't necessarily depend on the amount of fossil fuels they sell us. They just depend on the profits involved. So an alternative to having a future where you continue to drill like crazy and produce fossil fuels like crazy, our world's energy consumption in 2014, this last year, on a BTU basis, was about 85% fossil fuels, projected to drop only 10% to about 75% total BTU basis energy consumption on a planetary basis over the next 20 or 25 years, even with all the photovoltaics and FCEVs and all this in discussion. This global warming, climate change, greenhouse gases thing, what is it really driving toward? What they're trying to drive toward with all this bad science they're paying for at the rate, again, of about $500 billion a year, climate change related greenhouse gases, falsifying data associated with that and so forth to reach an objective, is to institute a global carbon cap and trade, a taxation and regulation regime which will apply to every nation on the planet, from which we will never escape, and it will be the equivalent of a global IRS. This is the goal. The goal is to create a global carbon cap and trade regime. But to do that, and this will be intrusive, it will be in everyone's lives, if they can prevent the emergence of the clean, non-polluting, locked-down, impounded, revolutionary energy technologies, breakthrough energy technologies, which is a story we have documented involving at least 50 to 100 cases we put together as volunteers with multiples of courtroom-grade evidence showing unlawful behavior, unconstitutional behavior, abuses of national security provision to keep these technologies from emerging. If those technologies were to get out, then those monopoly powers who are so parasitic in these areas being discussed would basically lose their game. Humanity's potential to get away from the single most expensive sector of the global economy, energy, tied to the transportation sector, tied into existing taxes, tied into planned, very onerous taxes and regulation, that's carbon cap and trade, involving all the developing nations and the developed nations. If we cannot get away from our reliance upon fossil fuels, and we can't unless we get out the impounded breakthrough energy technologies, you know, we're kind of screwed, because we're going to have, with these smart meters, so-called, on our home, which have some health issues, they got spine issues and so forth, but they're capable of time of use micro-billing. So it's going to be we, the naughty peasants, having our lights on or our AC on at a time of day when Big Brother says, oh gosh, you know, that's very expensive to run your AC at that time of day. Did you know you were doing that? And you're going to get on the phone and try and dispute these bills with your utility company, and it's sliced and diced time of use and different rates of billing for different times of day, for different types of energy coming from the big solar farms, and all these big solar farms and big wind turbine farms and so forth being planned, being sold to us as green energy and this sort of thing. It's more expensive on a per kilowatt, per megawatt basis than existing fossil fuels that are already too expensive. We need the breakthrough energy technologies out. Please sign the New Energy Declaration. Please hit the donate button on our website, newenergydeclaration.net, with a hyphen between the words, and please share this campaign with your friends and social media and so forth. But without getting that breakthrough free energy technology out, which would allow us to have, you know, shoebox-sized devices in our homes, we're off-grid wherever we want to live, basically free electrical energy for all purposes, for commercial and residential purposes, and we could take down the grid structure with time. Counterpart amazing technologies that could be applied to the transportation sector that wouldn't require us to go to, you know, ExxonMobil and fill up our new little FCEV with hydrogen at still the equivalent of $5 a gallon for the fuel. We need these things out, but if those technologies don't come out, and the groups that are paying for this fraudulent climate change science are also locking down those free energy technologies, then we're going to be in a regime where we're told we must consume less energy, it's going to cost more on a BTU basis, it's going to be taxed more, and the big energy and the big government firms designing groups designing all this are going to maintain their privileges and power, and we, the people who created these governments in the first place and should be in charge of licensing and regulating corporations, get the short end of the stick. So what we have to do is educate ourselves, wise up, turn off your television set, don't watch CNN anymore, don't watch Fox News, don't read the mainstream newspaper. You have to dig, you have to go to the internet while it's still available and still free and relatively uncensored and find these sources. 98% of the so-called greenhouse gases in our atmosphere are water vapor. Carbon dioxide is way less than 1% of the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Water vapor levels have a very direct correlation with temperatures that's proven. Carbon dioxide does not. Carbon dioxide has just reached the level of 400 parts per million. And the paid shills and what some call the prostitutes in the mainstream media are saying, oh, you know, 400 parts per million, it's the feared level of global warming and all this. A total rot. Completely fraudulent information. No association with reality whatsoever. Submarines, which control their atmosphere very scientifically, and the space station managed by NASA, keep carbon at around 4,000 ppm, or about 10 times the level they're telling us is problematic. It is not. We could have 10 times the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere here, and it wouldn't create any problem for us, and it wouldn't create any additional global warming. Plants love it. You want to give more of that to them, and we need them for food and oxygen production and so forth. This is completely fraudulent science. What is the real cause of climate change? Because it's not global warming. We're heading more towards global cooling. Competent, honest climate scientists agree on this. But climate change, it is solar activity. It's solar activity. It has to do with sunspot incidences. Research this. It has to do with solar flare activity. It has to do with the lessening of the magnetic field of the sun and the earth at this time. And there is a very direct correlation between all of those factors I just mentioned, and solar wind, and cloud formation on the planet. Cosmic radiation, sunspots, solar flares, solar winds, cloud formation here on Earth, and then the correlation between cloud formation and temperatures on Earth is very clearly established. Unlike carbon dioxide, where there's no correlation. We can go back in the historic record 400 million years through the Siberian ice cores and other such things and find that there's no real correlation between carbon dioxide levels and planetary temperatures. They have varied all over the place over the last 400 plus million years. They're not correlated in any meaningful way. But cloud cover and cosmic radiation and planetary temperatures are, and this is the cycle of ice ages and global warming and this sort of thing, which is a natural cycle. It associates with a 13,000-year cycle whereby our solar system crosses the high energy density galactic equator of our galaxy, the Milky Way, every 13,000 years. This is a phenomenon involving different levels of cosmic radiation. It in turn creates the solar flares and the solar phenomenon. That in turn affects the cloud cycle, cloud formation, and other weather patterns here that associate with the climate change effects we are experiencing. So I'm trying to wrap this up because I know my camera's battery is getting low at this point. So I'm gonna conclude this here. But it's all the more reason we need to educate each other about this suppressed, impounded, revolutionary, clean energy technology we need out. This is an issue involving major government corruption. The governments that have been established by we the people have gone sideways, and it is the same story with this fraudulent global warming climate change story. So we the people need to sort of get back on our horses. We need to become active in helping set our world to rights. And this particular area of free energy for humanity is tied very intimately to the equally and ultimately more important project of bringing our governments back to first principles. Thank you.